Tips from Trestle is brought to you by Wiseox AI, the Dining with Dementia Workshop, and the 100% Leader. Welcome to Tips from Trestle, the Senior Living Food and Hospitality Podcast. This podcast explores the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and the community experience. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. My goal for this podcast, bringing the resident and customer experience to the front of mind in our industry. We should bring the passionate spirit of food and hospitality to everything that we do and everyone we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. This individual, someone I was able to meet and chat with earlier this month, very excited to talk to her, Samantha Schreiber. Now, Samantha's current role is she's the Senior Human Resource Manager at Floor Decor based in Atlanta, Georgia. She's an experienced HR leader who's progressed from recruiting into talent acquisition and HR leadership. She has deep expertise in employee relations, employment law, culture building, training and development, leave management, and benefits. So she got it all. But she's no stranger to the senior living industry because before going to Floor and Decor, she spent over 6 years as the human resource director at Phoenix Senior Living in Georgia and led talent acquisition for Avalon Healthcare, serving mission-driven organizations that care for aging populations. Samantha brings a strong foundation in communication and employment law with a bachelor's in communication and public relations from Kennesaw State University and an employment law certification from Cornell. So, Samantha, thanks for being here on Cocktails and Conversations.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
So, when Nancy connected us to have this conversation, I got excited because this is something we've talked about various employment and how to build culture and do things like that. But one of the things we've never talked about is high potential employees. And I got really excited because I know that this is an area that I think our industry could do so much better at. And let's start at the top, right? How do you identify the difference between high potential and high performance? And so someone might be a top performer, but have a ceiling, while a low effort employee may have a lot of untapped potential. So walk us through the difference between the two.
Yeah, sure thing. So we'll walk through the difference between the two types of associates, and then I think it'll be important to share how to do that. So the definition between the two and the differentiation between them is when you have a high performer, they are high output. And these high performers you also want in your organization. So just because they don't classify as high potential doesn't mean that they aren't deserving of attention, but there is the difference that it's important to determine. So your high potential associates are your subject matter experts. They are your steady go-tos. They are your reliable associates. When it comes to high potential, they have a unique added layer to that high performance. And that high potential really is something that you as a leader is important for you to identify because that associate may recognize themselves that they have that high potential and they could be at risk for potentially leaving your community. So by identifying who is high potential versus high performance is important. And that high potential candidate to further define that individual is someone who is a rising star, qualities in them on a day to day basis that highlight more than what they do today. They have influence without having anyone reporting directly into them. Associates go to them for questions, mentorship, guidance. And so seeing that untapped potential is important to identify and then also develop to retain those type of associates.
Yeah, I think that distinction's important, right? Because we want to keep them, right? I think that's where we maybe miss the mark sometimes. And when you think about employees that work in senior living, things like burnout, emotional fatigue, being undervalued feels like it happens a lot, like just runs rampant in our industry. So We talk about that low effort and the why behind it, explain the difference between that being a symptom and not a personality trait. And how can we get that person more engaged and maybe find the right role for them?
Yeah, we know the environment in senior living is extremely fast paced. So, in order to do everything that we're discussing today, and then to answer your question more directly, our leaders have to ensure, from a time management standpoint, they're spending time to meet with their associates and understand what drives. When you understand what drives them and you have a high potential associate that may have low engagement or putting low effort into their day to day, you can help motivate them in the right ways. As we all know, each associate has their own unique drivers, they have their own unique passion, they have their own unique career goal. And I can't stress enough from a leadership standpoint, it's important for our administrators and our executive directors to truly connect with all levels within your community to help identify those unique nuances for the associate. And when there's a low effort associate that has high potential, the only way to get them to have higher performance and to attribute and maximize on their high potential is to understand who they are and also inspire them. So, low effort isn't necessarily a personality trait. And I think a lot of leaders sometimes fall with that reasoning, but a lot of times it may be because they feel unseen, feel demotivated for whether it's an issue that may have experienced that they feel like wasn't recognized. They feel undervalued because they're not given opportunities that maybe others around them in similar roles are being offered. They also may not be challenged. And that's a part where the potential comes into play. So if you have high potential in an associate who isn't being challenged with their work or is looking for more that we're not offering or sharing that there's opportunity for, that low engagement and that low effort can come into play. So again, getting to know your associate, understanding their drivers will really assist with identifying how you can re-engage those associates and giving them time and giving them space to communicate versus just making assumptions or assuming that's just who they are as a person.
How can a leader be more deliberate about doing that? Because I think I've experienced over my career this exact thing where it's like somebody who is high performing, but maybe they've maxed out what they can do, is standing next to that high potential, low effort employee. And you're like, man, how can I get employee B working like employee because I know they can do twice as much and be twice as impactful, but I don't know how to make that connection.
Yeah, so there's several ways, and again, understanding what your capabilities are within your community is important because you can get creative. Get creative. Think outside the box. You'd be surprised that sometimes small opportunities to allow individuals to either present on material that they're passionate about or having them shadow an associate or shadow a leader that you feel like they can benefit from, those smaller opportunities that don't have a necessarily immediate return can help build that employee. Personality traits are also important to understand because then you can match employees to help inspire each other. So if you do have two associates that have differences in approach, but combined, they may make a positive influence on each other. Make sure you partner them together in stretch assignments or again, presenting material that's needed. Because there are several conferences, whether it's within your organization, if they have regional conferences or local conferences or all hand galas like we've seen at the GSLA conference. There's
Yeah.
opportunity to give them for areas of development that you don't necessarily have to promote somebody into. And when you give them that opportunity to share content, lead, mentor, or even report back, giving them a stretch assignment to say, hey, and we can use a business office manager as
Mm.
an example, giving them the opportunity to report on something that as the executive director and administrator you're used to reporting out on allows them to see that a, I trust you. B, I see potential in you that I want to help develop. And three, it allows them to actually practice that without being in the position. And so, with that example, as well as matching with another leader that's like minded, you can really see the organic growth between the two. And then from that outcome, you can identify areas that you can help them develop with to be more specific, right? So instead of saying generally, I want to help you grow in your career, I want to see you here long term, I see a lot of potential. Associates hear that a lot, and it can be noise to them. So having those specific examples, outlining follow-up and timelines on when you'll be getting back to them or what assignments you expect them to produce on is where the rubber meets the road, and you can really see a lot of growth in those scenarios.
Yeah, I think what you just said there about the vague statements around, I see a lot of potential in you. I want you to grow, and like that being noise to the employee. I remember being very young before I got into leadership, hearing those same things and thinking, yeah, but how? Why? What's in it for me? Right. As that high potential employee, how can I take advantage of that? And one of the things that you made me think of was the simple task or the simple idea of not even so far as maybe career pathing, but like the presenting training, right? And who are those high performers who could do that, or high potential employees who could do that, so they feel like they're able to take on more. I love that. And it's could be something even as simple as that that could really draw that person out.
Exactly. And ensuring that your leadership team at the community sees the value in that as well. Because a lot of times your leadership team is closer to your frontline staff. And you want your leadership team to understand that succession planning shows how successful they are as leaders. So instead of having that competition or that territorial nature as a leader may have, you want to ensure your leadership team shares the same philosophy because they have that direct relation with the frontline staff. They're the ones hiring those associates, report into that individual. So they have that direct response to them. So I think the first line of attack as well is to make sure your leadership team is behind this philosophy and sees the value in it and giving them task to say, who's your lead on a team? If I were to ask someone on your team to report back on what your department is currently working on, who would you pick? And if the answer is that they don't have anybody, then the task then goes to your leadership or your manager to identify that talent and develop them directly. But that's how you're going to keep a positive culture. That's how you're going to keep a true mindset that they feel that they have opportunity at your community. And there's several tools as well to help identify that. One of them that I'll call out is just the 9 box talent planning solution. So leaders, it's important for our executive directors or administrators to do this, or you can even ask your leadership team to do this when you ask them that question, who on your team, on your frontline staff, would you identify as a mentor? The 9 box tool is a really great resource that helps put a visual in place. So on the y-axis is performance. So to make it really simple, how are your associates performing? So their annual review, you could even reference. So did they meet some but not all expectations? Did they meet expectations or did they exceed? So keeping it simple, put them in that box. And then on the x-axis is potential. When you see their potential, do you see that they are adaptable to environments? Do you see that they gravitate towards leadership opportunity? Do you see that they speak up in meetings and are a part of solution based answers? That will help you identify the potential. And then where they line up in that 9 box, you can really see visually where those people land. And the goal is for you to do that exercise almost every year because it is meant to be a moving target. It's meant to show you as a leader, am I properly developing my team? And then you can highlight who your high potential associates are.
I love that, right? Because for me, as you're talking through that, I'm thinking if I did that for every associate and then I kind of just layered the whole thing so I
Yeah.
could see the whole team,
Yeah.
I could then start, okay, this is how I need to develop this like quadrant and this I need to
Yes.
work on these employees. And it can really give me a like an annual plan for how do I develop not just my high potential, but all of my employees. I love that.
Yeah, because it can seem daunting per se, because a lot of some of the senior living communities are pretty large, right? You can
Yeah.
range between 60 associates all the way up to 150 associates. So how am I expected as an administrator to have one-on-ones conversation with all these associates on a routine basis to ensure that they have that engagement? A really easy way to go about that is one, to ensure that you're delegating the task of identifying high potential to your leadership team. And two is that 9 box tool. Keeping it simple to start is just a way to get off the runway, and then defining each box or category so you can ensure you're measuring your associates consistently with against the same definition. So I would encourage all administrators and executive directors to look at a 9 box tool to help build it against what their unique community needs. Because again, each community has different personality traits as well. And then asking your IDT team, your leadership team, to answer maybe the first round of 9 box. Where would you put your people? And then you can plan it from there, because the reality is our executive directors and administrators have a lot coming at them. It is a very service oriented position. But how can we make sure we do focus on the most important piece, which is the people? We all know that your frontline staff has direct access and influence to your residents. They need to be the happiest, they need to be the most satisfied. But sometimes it is hard to get that to them directly one on one. And that's a really great start.
Absolutely. One of the things you said earlier that it stuck out to me was keeping or them leaving quietly, these high
Mhm.
potential employees. And
Yeah.
so I want to talk a little bit about the cost of ignoring them here and they either leave quietly or quiet quitting. We've heard that phrase, that maybe it's a little
Yeah.
dated now, or they're staying quietly, right? They don't put in the effort, they just back off. And so thinking about that, and especially with the turnover that we see in our industry, 30, 40, 50, even 70% in some roles. What's the real cost when you think about losing these individuals and not taking advantage of tapping into them?
Yeah, so from a cost standpoint, hopefully your organization has turnover reporting and costs that they can provide you. If not, a really simple way to look at it as well is because I like keeping things as simple as possible because we have a lot
Yeah.
of strategy to support. But from a broad standpoint and generally speaking, what you have to consider when you're looking at cost of turnover, obviously there's the orientation and training costs. You have to consider time, right? How
Yeah.
much does time cost for you? Because when you have either your quiet quitters are really your low effort, low performers, where they're collecting a paycheck, they're not making an impact, and they may be actually causing damage as it relates to your branding, your reputation. We all know that negative energy is most contagious. So they
Mm.
may be also spreading a lot of negativity within your community. So your quiet quitters, you need to identify quickly to see if it's something that you can help improve, or identify how you need to transition and level up within your community. But from a cost standpoint, whether it's your quiet quitters or people are leaving, it's really time that you need to monetize. So time that you have to hire, identify, recruit, time of interviews. So you as an executive director or administrator or your interdisciplinary team, their salary divided by how many hours they spend in an interview is your cost, because they're not spending time doing their main responsibility, which is taking care of the residents and the associates. So you have to look at all the time it takes to either hire, orient, train, onboard, cost of advertisements, and those costs can be huge. Depending on the level of the role, it could range anywhere from your frontline staff to be about 3,500 to 15,000 a year. And then as you go up to management level positions, it can get exponentially higher due to the salary turnover that you're having. And then depending on when you're hiring these individuals, if you're looking for that top talent, sometimes you have to look at your compensation ranges. So make sure that your compensation range from your corporate office matches the market and the benchmarking appropriately so you can be competitive. And so that's an additional cost there to consider.
Yeah. That thinking about the time aspect, I think it's overlooked so often, right? Because we just they get their they're an executive director, they make 90,000 a year. And so it is what it is. But then what are we taking away from their core focus? Makes so much sense. You mentioned the monetary piece there at the end. We all know that in senior living, a lot of times margin is tight. If you're, unless you're at a 95% occupancy, your margin's always something you got to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
So things like raises and bonuses can be limited because of that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when you think about non-monetary ways for recognition and motivation, what are some things that you've seen that can move the needle there?
Yeah. So this really goes back to knowing what drives your employee, because having recognition for one person may not be filling the cup of another. So I can't say it enough. you have to know your staff. You have to know your drivers in order to identify what's important to them. And from a budget end, yes, that is a very real thing. So, from a non monetary standpoint, how can you support? And a lot of times, associates just need that recognition. They need to trust and feel inspired and that they enjoy coming to work. So, from a culture standpoint, that's not necessarily monetary. How do you make your culture a place where someone wants to work, wants to stay? So, ensuring that you're looking at your environment. Because a lot of times, and again, here's kind of a simple way of looking at it, when a flower or a plant isn't successful or isn't growing the way you want it to, do you blame the flower? Do you blame the plant? Or do you blame the environment that it's in? And so that is a really great way of also looking at your associate. So your associate in this example is that flower or plant. So how can you make sure that that is a successful, growing employee that wants to stay within your community? So the environment and the culture are non-monetary ways to make sure that you're providing that for them to stay, as well as knowing what recognition and ways in recognition speak to them most. Yes, you can do, and I think it's very important to keep doing this, your monthly meetings, recognizing those associates within those monthly meetings, whether that is a spot bonus or a lot of communities sometimes get funding or gifts from other vendors or family members. We can't necessarily give those directly to the associates because a lot of our communities have that policy. But if you have a certain pool that you're using that as a recognition piece, that's a really great resource to tap into as well. And using those monthly meetings to show front and center and show publicly to your teams that this is how we are using it is a really great way to say, "Oh, that is something that I wanna be recognized for, or I wanna be a part of that conversation." So it's also a motivator in that sense if you publicly recognize and publicly share the wins of the environment that you're building or your initiatives or motives behind your leadership, it can help inspire in the right ways because other communities as well have maybe competitive offers with their hourly wage. Livelihood is important. So, again, wages are a true need here that you want to make sure you're as competitive as you can be. But also, companies throw a lot of money at positions because they know their environment isn't as positive. So, if you have that positive culture, a positive environment, have that personal touch on recognition, that will get you really far beyond what monetary funding can provide.
Yeah, it makes me think back to, and I forget what year this Gallup survey was done. I feel like it might have been 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer, but the actual, like, dollars and cents, the wage ranked
Mhm.
10th or 12th in an employee's reason for being in a role and feeling connected and why they would stay. As long as you're meeting their financial needs, there's so much more things that are important in their work environment, and I think you hit on a ton of them as you talked about.
Another note too, if you don't mind me adding, is
Yeah.
not only showing the recognition piece, which is important, and I think a lot of times we may put it on the bottom of our priority list. It definitely needs to be more of a priority to recognize. But a lot of times where it's also really critical to recognize an employee is when you advocate for them. If your associate feels like you properly advocate for them when they're either not in the room or they have an issue and they feel like you help solve problems with them, that you truly help remove barriers that they may be experiencing, that is sometimes just as impactful than praise and recognition. They feel as though that you advocate when they need something, that if something is in their way or if they're going through something, whether it's personally or professionally or within your community, that you ensure everyone is treated consistently, fairly, and that you have their back.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense from my experience with employees. As we wrap up this part of our conversation, I want to ask you a little bit about resident relationships because we can't avoid that in our industry. And so,
Right.
because of the effort, right, the high effort, low effort, that's going to have a direct impact on our resident well being. Does that inspire employees? Does it drain employees? And how do you go about seeing which way it drives those employees?
Yeah. So Associates who work in senior living, no matter what role you're in, during your interview process, you need to identify that they have that passion for people. Outside of the passion for people, you do have associates who are more engaged with the residents, or those that are more tactical, those that are more observant or more so focused on the facility, the environment. So again, getting to know what brings them passion, what they naturally gravitate to will be helpful in motivating them and influencing them on where you need them to go, but also holding them to their position, being pretty clear on what expectations you require them of that role. And as we know, each role in a community or an assisted living or senior living, you always you always want to make sure even your facilities director, your housekeeper, your caregiver, having them understand that even though they may not have that direct one-on-one experience with the resident, them spending time and building that relationship with the resident makes all the difference. So telling them and in making sure you tell them that they have that empowerment. You never want to just be over reliant or assume that every level within your community knows that they have the opportunity to connect with the residents. So make sure that they feel empowered to do so. Because again, when you're interviewing these associates, hopefully you see that natural passion to be within a senior living community and be around our seniors, but you give them the opportunity to expand on that and leverage their personality trait. Some people are more introverted, so they're not as comfortable having that conversation, but even just letting them know that those greetings in the morning or throughout the day matter. If it makes them uncomfortable, what other ways of engagement can that person have that may not be so extroverted? So whether that's helping setting up the dining room, be participating in events somehow, even just helping set up and observe how the event is going, because that'll invite natural and organic ways, whether that's through laughter, whether that's through sharing a story, those levels of connectivity can go a long way as well with seeing how each personality trait can best connect with the resident. And you just get to maximize on it that way.
I love it. This has been such a great conversation. Samantha, thank you for jumping on here with us today and going through this. This idea of high potential employees is something that I think always lives in the back of our mind, but it's hard for us to actually tactically attack. So, everything you've shared today has been outstanding. And I think leaders will be able to, if they even take one thing you said, they're going to be leaps and bounds ahead. So, thank you for joining us today.
You are most welcome.
So, there it is, everybody. Another one in the books. Thanks again for tuning in. Please follow and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at Tips from Trestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.